Well, good evening and welcome everyone to this YRP Northeast webinar looking at GBRf's Class 69 modification program. For those of you that don't know what this program entails of, it's basically a fleet of Class 59s that were built in the late 1980s for coal traffic and are now being repurposed for more modern flows. So firstly, thanks to our guest speaker, Bob Tiller, who's GBRf's Engineering Director, and we'll be giving a brief 20-25 minutes sort of insight into the class, the design, the concept, the challenges we faced, and their intended role in the future of Britain's railways. Firstly, I'd like to thank you all for joining here and taking some time off in your evening to listen. More about the YRP itself, if I can make this work. So we've got our main three values, which are promote, inspire, and develop. So as an organisation, we are non-for-profit, we're volunteer-led, and our aim really is to promote the rail industry at all levels, but really to engender a belief amongst those that look to join the industry and those that are currently in their first 10 years that will really sort of show them the dynamic and broad aspect that this workforce has. So it's bringing together like-minded people to a platform where they can share ideas and inspire not only their peers but also the next generation. So we reach out to various educational bodies at school levels, prep schools, through into secondary education, to really try and drive the next generation forward into choosing rail as a good solid career in their later life. And also developing the skill sets that you gain not only in your first years in the industry, but also reaching out to the expertise that is out there to try and connect you with some of the best individuals in the business and in the industry to try and really sort of push you as far as you can possibly go. And even from personal experience, I can't speak highly enough of the organisation, because even in these tough times, it's been a really good opportunity to sort of come together and really share in what is such a solid industry, because lots of industries, hospitality, etc., are really struggling, whereas rail has really shone through and is delivering such a good service to the customers, both passengers and freight, that we serve. So coming on to the actual talk today, as I said to you, it's the look at modification program for the Class 69s, and Bob Tiller is our Engineering Director for GBRf Freight. I myself am George Witter. I'm an account manager with Rail Services. So thanks, Bob, for picking up the phone and agreeing to this call, and I look forward to hearing what you say about the program, because from my side it looks very interesting, and the class itself has a really bright future in pushing forward our growth ambitions in the next 5 years. So without further ado, Elliot, if you could please share Bob's screen, and we can hopefully get cracking with this exciting talk. There we go. Okay. Over to you, Bob.
Okay, I'm very much hoping that everyone can hear me. So I'm Bob Tiller. I'm the Engineering Director of GBRf Freight, and thank you very much for listening to this little talk. I always think it's quite good for you to understand the person who's speaking, where his background is. So I'll give you a very brief overview of me. I joined the railway in 1976, so an old codger, I suppose, or a boomer, as my son called me the other day. I started off as an apprentice on the shop floor at Old Oak Common at 16 years old. And I started up my career 4 years as an apprentice at Swindon, Old Oak Common, Reading, before moving on to other depots. Moved up through the grades to production manager, eventually became fleet engineer. I worked on high-speed trains, worked in various departments. I left, then went to BR Projects, where I worked on a number of projects, included was improving the high-speed train itself. I then went back to Great Western as the fleet engineer. I was involved in the re-engineering program for the high-speed train from Paxman to MTU. And whilst that came to an end, I was asked by First Group to go to this company called GB Rail Freight to give them a hand out with their freight locos. And I've never looked back, really. It was a good change of career. And I ended up as engineering director. So I've gone from the shop floor as a 16-year-old boy to an engineering director, and it's a hell of a journey, but I recommend it to anyone. So here I am to talk to you about a bit like the Class 69s. This really came from the fact that the Class 66, which I'm sure you're all aware of, is no more. Due to the change in the TSIs and the regulations, the Class 66 couldn't be built anymore. We built or purchased our last batch of 66s in 2016. At that time, we had a derogation for its emissions from its engine for 26 units. We pushed that a little bit and got 27, and all of those were delivered in 2016, the last one being Evening Star, which I painted up in nice green livery. So we had a bit of a problem, was where to get motive power. We ended up buying 10 Class 66s from DB Cargo, which were added to our fleet, and that still didn't give us enough motive power for our plans for expansion. And a lot of that expansion is not, you would call it stealing, I suppose, or obtaining from your competitors. It's really new to rail. We'd like to focus on new to rail because we'd like to expand the amount of freight that is carried by rail instead of by road. So we really wanted to expand, and DB wouldn't sell us any more locomotives. We didn't want to buy new. What could we do? What was available? And there are a number of old locomotive classes, 56s, 60s, 58s, that were built by British Rail in the last throes before privatization, and they weren't necessarily successful. The Class 60 being the last one, of which we did buy 10 of them, we bought those from Colas and put those into traffic, have not been the most reliable locos in the world, and we're currently going through a whole mod program to make them more reliable. And you can see why when EWS bought the freight company as it became DB Cargo, why they bought the Class 66 from America, far more reliable. So how could we go forward to make our business not only more reliable, but enhance our product, give something that was better emissions, save fuel, and have something which we knew that we could maintain much more easily. So I started looking around at what we had. So 56s, 58s, 60s, and it soon became apparent that this is all going to come down to the number of cores that were available. The core is the donor locomotive. I looked at how many donor locomotives of each type I could buy. And at this particular time, although I could have bought more Class 60s, DB Cargo wouldn't sell me any more Class 60s. So I couldn't actually do any more to modify any of those. So the only thing I could do was to buy another sort of donor. And I knew that EWS had originally looked at doing a rebuild on a Class 56 to improve it before they went to EMD for the Class 66. So I did a bit of investigation, had a look at it, how many cores I could buy, and it turned out I could buy up to about 20, 22. In the end, I bought 18 actually, 16 which I could reuse, and 2 for donors, spare parts. And I looked into how I could rebuild it. We looked at 3 different types of versions of how to do this. One was using a Cummins engine from America, and that rebuild would have been undertaken in Germany. We looked at a twin-engined MTU version, which actually gave us a lot more power, but unfortunately it was far too expensive. And a third version, which was much less risky, was a straightforward EMD 710 engine, which is in the Class 66. And I'm sure you know that the EMD 710 has been around for a number of years, and we were lucky enough that we had a derogation to apply for more engines that would retain the 3A emissions. So these, most importantly, are the most emission-friendly heavy diesels in the UK. I traveled myself off to America, sat in the boardroom in Chicago with a whiteboard, and over 3 or 4 days, myself, 2 of the engineers from EMD, sat down and designed this loco, what we could do, how we could put it in, what we would do if we had a choice to change a 56 into a 69. I then brought that back to my board of directors, sat in front of them, and they all said I was mad. After I explained to them that I wasn't mad, and I thought this was a good idea, and I basically told them this was half the cost of a new locomotive, and I'd get 30 years life out of them, and they'd be more economical, and they'd be multi-purpose, it became more viable and more viable. The cost of these locos each is about £2.1 million. Cost of a new loco, brand spanking new, if I bought one, if I could, would be about 4 million. So they're about half the price of buying brand spanking new. So we've gone through the stage of deciding how we're going to do it, which locos we were going to do it, and how much we would do it. The most important thing with a repower, and I've got a bit of history of this because I've repowered the Class 73s into a Class 73-9. So I took the old English electric engine out of that and put it with an MTU. I did the HST power cars, Paxman to MTU, and I did helped out with the, well, I didn't do the original 47 to 57, but I did the second batch of 57s from 2EMD engine. So I've got a bit of a history of this. We looked at how and where we could do this, and even more important to GBRf freight is employment, is keeping the skills within the industry. So when we went and sat in Chicago, it was really important that EMD themselves could do this in the UK, that we build a facility within the UK, expand maybe Longport, which is what we did, to keep those skills, to keep the engineering capability within the UK to build locomotives. This remains and will be probably the last major diesel loco built in the UK, and I'm very, very proud of it. So what is a Class 69? So the picture you see in front of you is 69001, which we took up to the Severn Valley Railway in early March for its type testing. One of the reasons why repowering is successful is that if you keep the rail to wheel interface and the dynamics of the locomotive, i.e. the weights, the power transition, and the balance and the gauging of the locomotive within the same parameters of the original, this is actually a repower under the TSIs, or the standard rail regulations within the UK. So it's not designed as a new locomotive. So I can do this under my own safety case. So this whole locomotive was designed, built, and done within GBRf freight's own CSM. We did it with our own sign-off. We've done it with our own under ROGs, and we've only employed an external third party to verify results and produce the technical file. That's signed off and goes to Network Rail, and they produced a statement of capability, and then it's authorized to run on Network Rail. At the moment, we've got an authorization for dead haul only because we're in the test phase, but very, very shortly, 69002, which will come out of Eastleigh out of paint in a very bright, refreshing color, and it's not GBRf freight livery. I've been playing with liveries a little bit. So when that comes out, we will be able to, in about 4 weeks' time, start hauling live trains on the network. So this is what they came from. And you'll notice a big difference between the front of a Class 56 and the front of a Class 69. 56s used to be called grids. They were called grids because it had this big grid on the front where the air horns were. And they were particularly drafty cabs. They were really drafty, and people used to wrap themselves in cloths and bags and God knows what else to keep the drafts off. We've completely cleaned up the front. We've taken those air horns and put them below the buffer beam. We've removed the jumper cables. We've changed the lighting to TSI compliant lighting. We've removed all the handrails, and now we've cleaned up the front completely. The 56 is actually a very, very robust and very good design. The engine itself, the old Rushton RK3 engine, was a fuel eater, uses massive oil consumption. It was very expensive to maintain, so it wasn't necessarily very successful. But the locomotive itself was successful on MGR trains and coal, as George said earlier. The major problem was it had bogie lift, so that when you took power on the loco on a heavy train, it had weight shift. So the front of the locomotive rises when you take power, and that travels through the main frame and towards the rear bogie. So the first axle of the second bogie, actually the springs raise on that bogie and you lose traction. So one of the most important things of doing this particular repower was how we could overcome the loss of traction and the loss of adhesion on the rear bogie when taking power. First of all, we completely stripped the class 69, or class 56, I should say, to absolutely nothing. It really is completely gutted. There is nothing left of it. Absolutely everything comes out, and it ends up like this, standing on a pair of donor bogies, ready to be cleaned. The bogies themselves are sent to Pullman Rail in Cardiff. They're fully overhauled, completely refurbished, traction motors, brand new wheel sets, brand new brake cylinders, completely like new. The cab itself is completely revised. Although I don't know if you do know what the cab of 56 is like, but it's what I would call an old brush design. So the cab itself is a wrap-round cab with a very front curved desk with traditional type controls and a conditional brush sort of power handle. All that has gone. We've kept the fascia the same at the back, but what we've installed is a class 66 pedestal, which is a very modern design, but we've retained the original D&M brake system of the class 56. So the locomotive itself has got completely the same bogies, the same wheel sets, the same brake system as the original class 56, the same dynamics, the same weight shift, everything. But the ergonomics of the cab have completely changed. We fitted TPWS4, GSMR, the power pedestal, and a lot more indicators, as you can see there, and a lot more better wheel slip and computer control. You can just see in the top right hand corner there the Electromotive EM2000, which I'll come on to a bit later, but that's had a major part in controlling what we call the weight shift of the power bogie. That's the front of 69002. As you can see, it's been completely cleaned up. One of the major problems with the class 56 was that it has got a fiberglass roof, and this used to get damaged quite a lot. And also it was a non-load bearing structure, so we couldn't put anything in the roof whatsoever because it's all fiberglass. So the only things that we could put in were in the cab nose end, which is why the headlights are standing upright, not to their lowering other position. It's the only space we actually had them to put them because of the room behind for other electronic controls. The body shell itself is completely shot blasted. It's taken to Axiom, where they get rid of all the rust, all the corrosion, completely shot blast it, and then the bed plate where the engine is going to go, the EMD 710 engine, is cut away. The fuel tank is slightly different position by about 4 inches to let the engine sump get into the right position, and the engine is lowered into position. This is the 710 engine installed actually in 69001. If anyone was into a class 56, they would know that you couldn't take this picture in a class 56 because the V16 engine of the Rushton takes up that whole space. I remember as an apprentice or going out to one of these on call to Didcot, which had a problem on an MGR train, and just walking down by the side of the engine, you had to literally scramble by, and there was no space to swing a spanner, let alone a cat. And there's a lot more space and a lot more room in this redesign, which has made it a lot easier for servicing and maintenance. We fitted new buffers. So the locomotive has new class 66 style buffers, draw gear, and as you can see here, completely overhauled wheel sets and traction motors. The whole cab itself has a new bulkhead, it's refurbished, and it houses all the electronics. Inside the engine room, we have a new cabinet. This cabinet holds the Progress Rail engine control management system. It controls the on-train data recorder, which is the orange box. So most people would say, oh, where's the black box on a train or black box on a plane? It's not black, it's bright orange. So you can easily find it in the case of an incident. Here, this is although this particular version is downloadable via a cloud. We can do this on all our 66s, for example. We can actually download and see how the train is going along. We can record its fuel consumption, its performance, and check it as it's going along the line. The compressor is completely different from a Class 66. Because of the Class 56's room and space envelope, we could not fit the engine-driven compressor from a Class 66. So this engine finishes at what we call the drive end of the engine, where the generator is, and the compressor is now fitted in that position, and it's an electric compressor, unlike the Class 56, which is shaft-driven from the end of the engine. The electronics, very, very much like a Class 66, but what we had to do was shoehorn all this into a Class 56 body shell. So we actually took the engine from the Class 66, we took a cooler group, so the engine cooling system and radiators and group, from a GP40 American locomotive built for South America, which was meter gauge. We took an electrical cubicle from a GP45 meter gauge locomotive, which was being designed for Europe, for Lithuania. We used that cubicle and fitted the Class 66 electronics into it. But we went one step further, and we fitted what's known as CP5. So we fitted an even better type of electronics than the Class 66 has got. And the point of doing that was to ensure that when we took this power, as I mentioned earlier about the balance of taking power and wheel slip, that the Class 69 did not suffer the same as a Class 56, and weight distribution didn't allow the first wheel of that second bogie to lift. And I'm very pleased to tell you that following tests at the Severn Valley Railway, we've succeeded tremendously. The software independently controls and takes the speed recordings of each individual axle and wheels and traction motor, and the tractive effort, which would have been around 291 kilonewtons on starting, we've actually increased that to about 320 kilonewtons, and that on starting a tractive effort all the way up to 15 miles an hour, whereas the 56 used to drop off, the 69 continues. And it's made a real positive weight and haulage performance within the locomotive's capability, and it's really worked very, very well. So the other problem is, how many of these can we build? So we've got an option for 6 more. We're building 10 at the moment. The 10 will be used initially in the Tunbridge area. We're training up drivers as we speak. It will be a multi-purpose locomotive, so we'll use them for a variety of services, but not strictly heavy haul at this particular moment in time. And there'll be a bedding in period till we exactly know what they can and can't do. We envisage that that option, we could, if we wanted to, buy a few more from preservation sites, but at this moment in time we don't want to. I'm sure you're aware of the decarbonisation strategy that's going to hit us. So GBRf and myself, we're actively looking at what we can do for longer term to decarbonise our industry. One way of doing that is by fitting or using HVO fuel, which is a man-made vegetable type fuel, which can be built without using or used without using diesel fuel. And this locomotive can run on HVO fuel, so it can actually be very clean and it won't have any NOx particles. 69001 at the moment is back at Longport. We're going through some rectification work and the last type testing, which is cab noise and EMC testing. That'll be signed off by the end of this week. You have to compare like for like. So you have to compare an old 56 with a new Class 69, and the Class 69 must be better than or equal to its predecessor in order to pass the tests and get your derogation. In this particular case, the cab is a lot quieter, so we're confident that we'll pass the test. It'll take us about 4 to 6 weeks to get the final bit of paperwork completed, but I very much hope that the first 69 haul train will be about the first week in May. 69001 will make its way to Eastleigh in about 2 weeks' time, where it will go in for paint, and that's going to be painted in a very special livery, which will show the contribution between America, USA, and the UK in this partnership to rebuild this locomotive. 69002 comes out of Eastleigh at the same time. That's in a bit of a different livery, I'm prepared to say at this particular moment in time. That'll go back to Longport for finishing, but that won't come out until the middle of May. They will go on testing. Each locomotive has to do 1,000 miles of trouble-free running before it enters traffic, and it goes on lease. And the others follow, one per month until the end of the year. We have until the 1st of July to take the option on the other 6. Now, you may have seen that we've got a number of locos that have come from Germany, 66s. They are imports. We've just taken 8 of those, which will bring our Class 66 fleet up to 100 locomotives. We possibly could find 1 or 2 more, but at the moment it's getting much more difficult. So at the moment, our fleet will remain at 100 Class 66s and these 10 Class 69s with the option of the further 6. Now, I've talked on for about 25 minutes. I hope that's of interest to you, and I'm very welcome to take any questions.
So yeah, I've checked the screen. I've got one question here from one of our attendees. They've asked the question: does the draw gear or the drawbar have the same haulage capability of a Class 66? So one of the issues with running heavier trains is the relative weakness of loco couplings. So he or she's interested to find out if improvements can be made.
Yes, it's got exactly the same drawbar. The Class 56 was actually designed around the drawbar and drag box of a Class 47, and actually it's got the same capability as a 66.
Okay. Just for the attendees, you can go into the chat box and just type any messages, and I'll pick them up and I can ask Bob. One from me while you do that. You've mentioned about, you've taken parts from, American-built locomotives for South America and Lithuania. It sounded like it fitted quite nicely, but did you have any sort of teething issues about trying to slot these myriads of different sort of bits of kit into the Class 69?
Well, the bits of kit may have come from other locos, but they are the same as a Class 66. So
right. Okay.
One of the clever things about EMD is that they've utilised the same parts all around the world. And what they've done is fitted them in all sorts of different body shells. So although they might come from a GP40 or from a GP60 or whatever it is, the component is exactly the same as we fit in the UK. It's just a different class of loco and a different position.
Okay, very interesting. Another question asks, are these locos ETCS ready?
They can be fitted with ETCS, and they have the necessary cabling and the racking to fit the necessary ECTS, but there is not a design at the moment for a ECTS.
Okay, and the follow-up question was, and why don't they fit ECTS from you? Is it because we feel the technology isn't quite there yet to justify being built from you? We
don't even have a design for 66 yet. We have the ECTS has been fitted in Germany, a different design to the one that's been fitted by Siemens in the UK. And we don't have a final design signed off with the UK for 66. So I think 69 is going to be some way off.
Okay. Very interesting. Another question asks, any particular reason for starting the use in Tunbridge Depot? Is that where they're destined to start?
Yes, so quite simple, because there was only 10 of them. We wanted somewhere where we could optimize our driver training, where we could look after them in one particular place. So we're going to do some depot alterations at Tunbridge. There's an old pit area there and some additional sidings where we're going to put the pit back in, and we're going to put a cover all there, and it's going to be a little stabling point. These locos, whereas in BR days would want us what we call A exam every 7 days, we actually won't give these an exam for 28 days. So and that's a non-pit exam in 28 days. They'll only go over a pit every 3 months. So we've no need to take them back to Doncaster or take them back to Peterborough or anywhere else in that time, so they can spend their time at Tunbridge. And not only that, the levels of work that we do at Tunbridge suit this type of locomotive and its capabilities.
Okay. Lots of questions here, which is good to see. Another question asks, would the C5 electronics upgrades be transferable to the Class 66?
Yes. So we've just signed a multi-million-pound extension to our maintenance contract with Electromotive Diesel for another 10 years worth of contract maintenance from the OEM. And within that contract is for the upgrade of all the electronics on all the locos within our fleet, to upgrade the software, upgrade the electronics, put some automatic engine stop on, and some other benefits to improve engine performance.
Okay, brilliant. Stephen asks, how will the fuel economy compare to a Class 56?
So it's roughly, I'll try and put it in percentage wise, it's a 30–40% improvement. That's how much better.
Okay, brilliant. That's because of the new engine technology, the EMD.
That's because you're fitting a 710 engine with electronic controls, electronic injectors, and completely controlled to the minuteness. Whereas the Class 56, the original Rushton engine, just pumped in fuel as you open the power handle.
Okay, very good. Another question asks, as with all engineering problems, there's often something that doesn't quite go right or we didn't think about at the time. Is there anything that you sort of came across mid-project that caught us unawares in the design development?
Yes. Firstly, when the Class 56 was built, 30 of them were built in Romania, and the rest were built in the UK. What we found was that there was a number of building and dimensional differences between the ones that were built in Romania and the ones that were built in the UK. So much so that we've only at the moment converted one of the Romanian ones, the rest of the British ones, because the differences were so much. We also found that where the coil springs of the bogies go up into the body shell, where they're retained, there are pockets. And within these pockets, the Romanians have filled lead weight in order to rebalance the locomotive, correct balance, where they hadn't got, for whatever reason, the locos didn't have the correct weight at the right end or the right corner. And they filled lead shot into these areas. We've removed all this chicanery, and the locos now balance correctly.
Okay, fantastic. Hanley asks, are there any gauging or weight clearance issues with the Class 69 versus the Class 56, or do we see an improvement with the Class 69?
The gauging envelope of the Class 69 is 1.5 millimeters smaller. It's not much, is it? But it's actually smaller than Class 56.
Platforms.
Yeah. So actually, the space envelope of the Class 69 is smaller than a Class 56, and there is no issues whatsoever with the rail-to-wheel or dynamic interface. It's exactly the same.
Brilliant, excellent. And okay, that's pretty good. And weight-wise, how do they compare? Sorry.
Exactly the same. Exactly the same.
Yeah.
Yeah, they have to be exactly the same to maintain the dynamics.
Okay, excellent. Thank you for that. I'm just going to check to see if we've got any further questions. Now's the time if you want to. Anything else? It's been a good haul of questions. Here we go. I think we're pretty much there, to be honest, Bob. I think that's all of them. Scanning through them. Yeah, I think that's it. Excellent. Okay, well, Bob, that's been absolutely brilliant. Thank you so much for that, that insightful talk and those pictures. Elliot, if you can switch you back to myself, I can probably share my screen, hopefully. That works. There we go. Right. So hopefully you should be able to see that now. There we go. If I just minimize that. So again, thank you so much, Bob, for your time on this balmy evening for mid-March, and hopefully to everyone that's attended, that's a really good insight into this, bold new re-engineering of an old sort of with the British Railway network. And hopefully, we wish Bob and the team all the very best with the class, and hopefully, as you say, we'll see some interesting liveries pop out of Eastleigh in the next few weeks and months, and who knows what kind of trains they'll appear on, because they've got the availability like a 66 to go anywhere in the country and support us with numerous flows. So thanks again for all the attendees for attending, for their questions. I think it's a really good selection of questions, and hopefully we'll get to see you in the fullness of time in person, and hopefully we can do a few more sort of GBRF themed ones in the next few months as we come out of lockdown. Before I go, I will just bring to your attention, if I get this right, here we go, YRP event that we're aware of on our radar, and that is for the London and South East Committee, and it's entitled "Who Are the Railway Mission? A Catch Up with Andrea Smith." Details will be available to you to the website probably in the next coming few weeks, to hopefully get to see a lot of you on that interesting talk. I'm sure that'll be insightful from Andrea. Obviously, check out the website for various events from all your regions, a couple of national ones, and we look forward to seeing you hopefully back in the normal forum, which is in meeting places, and obviously it'll drink afterwards. We get to catch up and just share some ideas and just see how the industry as a whole has been doing, and keep going from strength to strength. Right, well, thank you again for attending. Thank you to Bob for coming on this evening and sharing his thoughts and his experiences throughout his career. And thank you, Elliot, in the background. You wouldn't have seen him, but he's in the background filtering out questions and just basically running this and making sure everything runs smoothly. I'll finish up there, and hope you will have a great evening and a good rest of the week, and a good Easter, because it's coming around fast. And look forward to seeing you all again soon, and keep well. Take care all. Cheers.